What's good, everybody? We are back, episode 36 of Catch and Counter. Uh, wild, wild. I never would have called this fight. Fabio Wardley stopping Joseph Parker in round 11 of a fight. Once again, he's well behind in some controversy around the stoppage, but I guess just to start off, Rip Nibs, what was your reaction to this result? Because I definitely did not see this coming.
I had Joseph Parker winning late. I was extremely wrong. Mr. I Told You So was knocked upside his head. Look, man, I thought Joseph Parker, for all the reasons we're all going to talk about, especially with the run he was on, right? He was on a pretty good run when it comes to heavyweight boxing. So there's no way. This worldly guy, he's a one-trick pony, and he proved me wrong, bro. But as far as the stoppage itself, to answer that question specifically, initially I was like, yeah, nah, I think he could have kept going. But watching it back, I go, I get it. You know what I mean? Parker had been tagged a couple of times throughout the fight. This wasn't the first time, and he wasn't answering back. He was getting hit with some hard shit, and he wasn't throwing anything back. He had a little bit of an exchange, right before the stoppage, but really before that, and those last couple of punches, he wasn't doing anything. So, you know, could he have gone on? Probably, but it was one of those stoppages where it was 50-50 for me. Like I would have been cool if he'd have let it go for a little bit extra, but I wasn't mad that he stopped.
That was a stoppage, and we'll get into the fight itself in a sec. But that was a stoppage to me that I had to say I disagree with it, but I can't say it's a bad call. When I say it's a bad call, a bad stoppage when you see it. It's Rolly Romero and Ishmael Barroso. It's those couple of Tony. It's the one that this ref fucked up with Carl Froch and George Groves way back in the day. Like a bad call when you see it. Sometimes there's calls that happen that you go, I might have handled it this way, but I can't say that's a bad call. The only thing I might have changed was like, show me something, or just some sort of indicator that, like, listen, you're on thin ice, and I need to see something so that I know you're still engaged. Other than that, Parker wasn't giving any indication that he was okay, and he had been hurt in the second, like you said, he'd been hurt in the 10th, and now he's hurt again in the 11th. And so it's tough to say that it was a bad stoppage. But in terms of the fight itself, I think we were off last week, but I think we both, right, kind of felt like Parker was going to be of a higher class, that as great as the run that Wardley's been on, avenging the draw with Frazier Clark with that first round knockout, it was brilliant. Losing, I would say 8-2, 7-3 to Hooney before stopping him in the 10th round. He's done some amazing things, but this is now you're in the top two in the division, and those technical flaws that he's had for his whole career are not going to be able to stand up to Joe Parker. And what happened was I actually kind of felt like Parker put his foot on the gas too early. He came out, he kind of buzzed Wardley early in the second, came out swinging and left himself open and got caught. And once Wardley had Parker hurt, the whole dynamic of the fight changed. Now it's a shootout. Now it's this physical fight. It's tactical, but it's more of a shootout and a slugfest, which always leaves Wardley in the mix, right? I felt like in that moment, and there's also a school of thought, right? You get a guy like Wardley hurt, you don't want to play with your food. You got to get out there and fucking get him out of there, because he has power for 12 rounds, as we saw at the end of the fight. But I felt like he just opened up too much. He left himself too available because he felt like this is my moment to get him out of there. And from there, I felt like Parker picked it up again in the mid rounds. The double and triple jab was keeping Wardley off guard. He kind of got it together defensively, but Wardley is, I would say, a more athletic and dynamic Deontay Wilder, in the sense that the late starter, 12 rounds of power, but also has more of a variety in his offense. Maybe he doesn't have the same, I don't think anybody has the same kind of one punch detonation of Wilder, but he has that thing of like, this power carries the whole fight, regardless of how bad you're beating me. And So there was things about this fight that started to remind me of Wilder and Luis Ortiz, where we saw in those middle rounds that Ortiz hurts Wilder. He goes after him. He goes, swinging. And later on, his aggression comes out against him because he's left himself too open to this power puncher. Anyway, all that to say, basically, I was impressed with Wardley's general boxing ability, but really his ability to stay composed in a fight he's losing now twice in a row to high-level opposition and find his moments to get knockouts.
I think that you're correct in that a lot of people will say that, before this fight, myself included, Wardley was either a one-trick pony or he got lucky in his fights with his knockouts or his stoppages. Here's the thing about that I want to mention real quick about, lucky punches. You got to be there to land those punches, right? Lucky punches don't land themselves. And usually they've got to be set up or landed at the right time too, right? Like you've got to know what you're doing to land a lucky punch. Wardley does that. And then you've got to have the power to carry out the detonation, right? A lot of people, will say that, oh, well, Wilder was a one-trick pony. Yeah, but when you've got eraser power, that one trick becomes, pretty unstoppable. I think that what Wardley proved in this fight is he's got more tricks. You know what I mean?
He's like a 3-trick pony, right? Like he can roll a little shot. Yeah. He's got some timing on that right hand. He's got good hand speed. He has a great engine, right? He can keep the fight going. I think if anything, he's more. I mean, I think ultimately we saw the difference. Wilder, who really is a one note, and it's a great note, but that one note against Parker was ineffective because he couldn't find his moments to let his hands go because Parker was so measured. Parker gave Wardley more of those opportunities here by opening up, trying to get him out of there, trying to be more physical, and in the process getting buzzed himself. Jesus M says, Dakota, UFC refs in the ring say, show me, fight back, etc., but boxing refs don't. I think they do, right? I mean, you'll see a good ref like Harvey Dock, or David Fields, when they start getting close, they're hanging on that front rope. They'll say, show me something. I feel like that's a relatively common practice.
You get boxing referees all the time that'll say, hey, you got to show me something, defend yourself. Or, hey, at the end of a round, right? Like maybe at the end of that 10th round, judge goes over to the corner. Hey, look, if it looks like that again, I'm stopping it. Like they'll tell you, hey, if it looks bad, I'm jumping in. You see that a lot in boxing. Especially when the stakes are high. This referee did not do that, but you do see it a lot. You definitely see guys that say, "Show me something," or "Hey, get going," or they give that warning, that verbal warning that, "Hey, look, it's looking bad. Even if it's not bad, it's looking bad. You need to do something to keep me from stopping this fight." I'm with you. I think I would have liked to have heard some kind of verbal cue from the ref to give, because I don't think Parker felt like he was in trouble. I thought he was actively defending himself, but he was taking shots. So and you saw it at the end. His faculties were in place, right? He wasn't, stumbling all over the place, but he was taking some pretty bad work. So I would have liked, just like you said, I would have liked somebody to interject and say, "Hey, look, show me something, guy, because it's looking pretty bad."
Yeah, there was too many unanswered. I think that's where it started. There was just too many unanswered. But when you're in the heat of battle like that and you're Parker, you're not thinking about what the ref wants to see. You're thinking about getting through the moment so I can come back with mine. And by the way, I believe the scorecards were released. One of them had it 8-2 for Parker. The other had it 6-4 for Parker, and the other was a draw, as far as I understand. I got to tell you though, man, now that Wardley's done this a couple of times, there's two things. One, I think he's the obvious next opponent for Usyk. I know people like the video game kind of vibe of the Itama fight, but to me, Wardley, now having beaten Parker, having beaten Hooney, first round knockout against Frazier Clark in a rematch. Parker was the consensus number 2 heavyweight, and you beat the number 2 heavyweight. At least for me, that's the guy that I want to see against Usyk. But I can already see with Wardley that he's going to have it right up until he doesn't. He takes a lot of punishment. And sometimes with these unbreakable force guys like Joe Joyce, like Jarrett Hurd, like Juan Diaz, one day they just don't have it anymore because every time they get a win, they have to take so much to get there. But I'm here to enjoy the ride while it's happening.
I think Joseph Parker was his biggest enemy in himself, not only for the flaws that you pointed out earlier with him trying to jump on Wardley early and then opening up the floodgates. He was also heavier than he should have been. You know, I think that was more of a strategic move. Maybe he thought putting on some weight make it easier to handle.
I
You know
think he
what's coming
wanted to be
next.
physical.
But let's face it, you're Joseph Parker. You fight a certain way, right? And you fought a certain way that pretty much your whole career. You didn't load up on weight when you were fighting, the one trick pony and in Wilder, and he hits a hell of a lot harder than Wardley does. Wardley was just there, and he was willing to unleash his weapons. I think if he had been in a little bit better shape, the fight goes different. With that being said, I don't want to see Wardley fight Usyk. I think he would be food for Usyk at this point in his career. I think
I do too, by the way, but don't you think he's earned it? Like if Parker had earned it, which I truly think he had, I don't see any other guy other than Agit Kabayel, who's always the black horse. But like, doesn't Wardley kind of earn it with a win like that? At least to me.
it would be an uneventful fight. I think it would be worse than the Usyk Dubois fight. Like I think it would just be a really one sided ass whooping, you know. And I know Wardley just beat Parker, right? And that's impressive. Usyk is not Parker, right?
I
and
think it has
and
the potential to look more like Pacquiao Margarito, which was a one-sided fight. But when you go back and watch that fight, it's very entertaining, and the physicality of Margarito's body punching and pushing him back gave Pacquiao challenges, gave him physical challenges that while he was winning rounds, it was a brutal fight. I think that Wardley and Usyk would look more like Pacquiao Margarito because I think that Wardley is much more durable than Dubois. I think he's got a little bit more, he's a little more headstrong. I think he's got a little bit more that fire, that tenacity in him. And I don't think he would take no for an answer, but I also think that Usyk is a much better fighter technically and would completely outclass him. But I think it would have the potential to be a great fight.
I'd like to see him get somebody else first. That's just me. And maybe I'm hating. Maybe maybe I'm not drinking the sauce. I don't know. But I think Usyk one. I think Usyk's kind of deserved the right to pick whoever the fuck he wants to fight next, if he does. I mean, he's talking about hanging it up, so we might not even get another fight out of him, before he's out of here. But I think he's earned the right to fight whoever the fuck he wants next. And if I'm being 100% honest, I think he's at a position where he doesn't fight a Worldly if he doesn't have to. You know what I'm saying? If his last fight is if his next fight is his last fight. With that being said, I do think there are plenty of opponents out there for Worldly to get in the mix with that would be extremely entertaining. I wouldn't mind seeing him against a Dubois. I wouldn't mind seeing him against some of these other guys that are still hanging around. Hey, why not open up one of those belts? Usyk's got because he's probably going to be
Maybe
sitting
it's
out the rest of
Wardley and
the year.
Itama.
Look, and I would love to watch it. You know what I'm saying? I just don't. Even if I were on board with Wardley versus Usyk, I don't think Usyk picks Wardley next. That's just what and I could be wrong, but I don't think he goes out on that. It's not a big, Again, congratulations to him. He's not a big enough name to be
Yeah.
on Usyk map at this point.
What's your level of interest in a rematch? Because this was also a great fight. I feel like people are not talking about because of the stoppage. They're not talking about the fact that this was like a great heavyweight fight.
When it comes to heavyweight fights, this was about as good as it gets.
Right?
You know, and if I'm being 100, I'm putting this on my considerations for fight of the year. Look, when you have a heavyweight fight these guys were throwing punches from the jump, bro. That second round, I thought Worley was gonna have Parker out of there, bro. And at the end of the second round, hats off to Parker for turning that shit around. I think he won a lot of the middle rounds. You know what I mean?
That's conditioning,
And
bro. And that's sometimes the difference with a
and
high level heavyweight fight. You got two guys who are in condition and in condition enough to make adjustments.
I think if Parker comes in around 225, 230, I think that's his sweet spot weight wise, right? I think he boxes circles around Worldly and doesn't give him anywhere near the opportunity to throw as many punches. The problem is Worldly seems to have an engine that doesn't stop either. Like, you know what I'm saying? This dude is he's winging Sunday punches from the bell, from bell to bell. You know what I mean? So, and that takes a lot of, I mean, I don't know what his conditioning regimen is, but the fact that you can do that for 12 rounds, 10, 12 rounds,
At that size,
bro, he's got the goods. I'll give him this. I'm not shitting on Worldly at all. After this, I think he can pretty much name his fight. I don't see the Usyk fight happening. You know, not that I wouldn't watch it, but I just don't see it happening. But I think he can pretty much get anybody else he wants, and it'd be kind of hard to pick against him to be honest with you with what's left of the field. You know what I mean? Unless Tyson Fury decides to come back or whatever. But I really don't see anybody in the current field not named Usyk that he'd really have to worry about.
I think Kabayel would beat him. I think that there's a level of in your chest that Kabayel presents that I don't think Wardley's had to be in with. I think that the fact that he was able to stop Gilles Zhang with body shots, that he was able to knock out Frank Sanchez. I think that if there's anybody that's a threat to Usyk, Wardley, Parker, whoever the fuck at the top, I think it's like Kabayel, and I think that's why you see these guys kind of steer clear of him because a lot of people forget about the boogeyman from Turkey.
Yeah, I mean, Caballo's got all the goods, right? He's got the stuff you want in a heavyweight fighter, and then he's the like you said, his biggest problem is not just that he's beating top tier guys, it's how he's doing it,
He's fucking
right?
them up.
Right. So nobody wants that smoke. There's been he's really the only person who's been able to break down, Big Bang Zhang. So it's like, let's be really clear. Even in his other losses, he's never been broken down like that before, bro. So and beating Frank Sanchez that way, come on, guy. Now, there were people who were ducking Frank. They're definitely going to be ducking the guy who beat him. You know what I mean?
Yeah, the heavyweight division is definitely in a transitional period right now because you're seeing the Joshua generation, the Fury generation, the Usyk generation. They're all closer to retirement, and we're seeing the young guys like Itama and like Fabio Wardley and even Parker, who's in his early 30s and been around forever, I think has been kind of a part of that new class. Kabayel, there's a new class of heavyweights that I think are kind of ascending, and I think it makes the division more interesting.
I think you're going to see a couple of guys come up from cruiserweight in the next year or two, and start making some pushes too, man. Like you see a lot of these guys at cruiserweight, come fight night, they're walking in there 220, 230 as it is. You know what I mean? They're cutting weight to make the 200-pound limit, but a lot of those guys come, like I said, coming in fight night, you know, around that 220, 230 mark that you see some of these heavyweights fighting at, or weighing in at. You know what I mean? So I wouldn't be surprised if you see some of these stars from the cruiserweight division coming up and jumping on that opportunity, right? Because I do think it is getting thin. It's starting to get thin again. Like we went through a renaissance basically at the heavyweight division over the last several years. With the Klitschko's kind of going from there, and now it's starting to thin out again. I wouldn't be surprised if you see some of these lighter guys come up and say, "Hey, let me get some of that action."
Adari Penant is saying they should get rid of the cruiserweight division because majority of them are heavyweights and light heavyweights. Listen, bro, I love me the cruiserweight division, bro. I don't understand people's disdain for it. Whenever I get to watch a Zordo fight or a Jayo Pataya or an Usyk's cruiserweight days, there was a great class of Eastern European cruiserweights and Cuban cruiserweights at that time as well. I love the division, but it gets no love, man. I never understood why entirely.
I think the cruiserweight division is basically the redheaded stepchild of boxing, bro, because it's in between the light heavyweights, which are super athletic, who are basically throwing as many punches as light heavyweight or junior welterweights, but they look like they could be heavyweights, when they get into the ring, and then you got the cruiserweights who are just right in that middle sweet spot. But let's face it, there are a lot of cruiserweights who could give hell to some of these heavyweight guys. I mean, Usyk came from there. You know, uh, Holyfield. You know what I mean? You see a lot of guys come up from the cruiserweight division and have a lot of success. So I think the cruiserweight division is just fine where it is.
Definitely a slept on division. Ultimate Boxing Championship would have been better than the name Zuffa. Couldn't agree more. What would be even better if they'd all just go away, but we'll save that for another day. Let's get into Salida Promotions real quick. Joshua Pagan getting a very impressive stoppage over Malik Montgomery, who, despite bleeding, the entirety of this fucking fight and going to see the doctor every 6 minutes, never got stopped, never gave up, never stopped coming forward. But Pagan kept his composure, stayed in the pocket, showed some really quality inside fighting and some good poise. And hopefully it's not the last time Montgomery has a go. I was a little surprised at the corner's inability to get any kind of control over that cut. But Nibs, any thoughts on Pagan as a prospect?
I mean, just leading off of what you just said, this is one of those fights where it proves to you how important a great corner is, right? It's not just the guys in the boxing gym training you on how to throw those ones and twos, but having a great cut man, or at least a good cut man, can get you through some fights. Because let's be really clear, Montgomery was in no trouble of being stopped on his own, right? Like he was, if they hadn't stopped that fight, he would have made it through. If it wasn't for the
He was losing,
cut,
but very much in the mix.
very much in the mix. And to be honest with you, if it wasn't for the cut, who's to say he that fight might have been a draw had it been not for the cut. It wasn't like he was getting completely dominated. He was losing, don't get me wrong, but having a good cut man can change the complete trajectory of not only a fight but your career. And I think it's been proven over and over again. And I think this is another one of those fights that puts that to the test. Hey, make sure you have a quality cut man in your corner.
I think that's really been way more highlighted since the Tim Tszyu Fundora first fight, and especially with how Tszyu's career has gone since that fight. When you see a guy with a cut like Montgomery had, and by the way, Jesus, I don't know, I didn't see that Sean Porter's father in the corner that I could see, but when you got a cut like that, and then they cut to the corner and they just have a blood-soaked towel that they're putting pressure on the cut and then sticking a Q-tip in it. Like, I'm no cut man. I just know that's not how you do it. I know that there's different adrenaline creams that can slow the bleeding. There's ways of putting that and then layering Vaseline over it so it's slipperier. I at least know what it looks like when Mike Basil or Stitch Duran is doing a cut in the corner and it's being done the right way. And it can truly be devastating for a fighter if it's not done properly, as we saw with Tim Tszyu. The thing that I was surprised about with this fight was like the fact that the corner couldn't get the cut together was obvious by like the 4th or 5th round, but they continued to let him keep going. And then the stoppage seemed kind of random to me. Like, okay, if we were gonna do the blood in the eye fight for this long, why was that the moment? And to me, that became a little unclear.
To me, it was I thought, yeah, the blood looked bad, but the guy was in no trouble of getting, like it wasn't like he was being battered into oblivion, right? Um, I just think the amount of blood itself is what made them stop the fight. Maybe they stopped it for a health concern and like, hey, he's losing way, way too much blood. Maybe that's the reason. But again, like you said, it had been like that for a while, and he was acquitting himself pretty
rounds.
well.
Yeah, multiple rounds.
So if a guy is losing that much blood and he's still in the fight, let him finish it. Fuck it. You know what I mean? Like unless he's walking around woozy because he's lost half his goddamn blood. Let that dude get in there and fight his fight, and that's what he was doing. So, I think they could have let it go on, but again, it's another one of those type of situations where I'm I'm not going to argue the stoppage. I just didn't agree with it.
Couple undercard fights I just want to highlight real quick. The main card was open with a great fight between Curia Tapia and Maria Nella Ramirez. Tapia just in her fourth or in her eighth fight as a pro, I should say, and a little older, so they're moving her really quick. But she showed a lot of poise, a lot of boxing ability, and a lot of fire inside the pocket. Kind of reminded me of Cecilia, who we did a little tribute to on our last episode. The other one was Ashley Ann Lozada winning what I would also call potentially a fight of the year candidate against Melissa Odessa Parker, who may be 6-4-1, but has fought some of the best of her era, especially in the last couple of years, and was right there for the entirety of this fight with Lozada, who's a real character. She's a rhythm fighter. She's kind of got to hype herself up and get psyched up, and there's certain technical things that she does that you wouldn't want to teach a young fighter. But when she finds that rhythm and starts letting her hands go, she's a real problem.
I think that there's really not much more that I can say to that. I agree with you. I think that I think we all just got to start paying more attention. And I know this is not necessarily on topic, but I just think we all got to start paying way more attention to these female boxing fighters, bro. Because I don't know about you, but for my money, right? These girls are fighting at a much higher level than some of the guys. Like, you watch these cards, right? Even the Big On and Montgomery card, they had like a couple of girls on there, and it was nonstop, bro. It was um nonstop action. They're thank you, Jesus, for looking that up for us.
And which, by the way, I think makes it all the more shocking that cut got so out of control with a guy that experienced. He should be more prepared.
And it's one of those things where you don't know who's handling that part of it. But if you are the head trainer, that's got to be your responsibility, right? Who's doing the cuts right now? Maybe somebody else is handling that for the Montgomery camp. I don't know, but I think it ultimately comes down to the head trainer, right? Like, you're the guy who needs to figure out who's doing cuts.
Even if you're not the guy that's supposed to figure it out, somebody of that experience, like, all right, when it comes fight night and it's time for me to do my job, who else is going to be there to help it? Help me be able to do my job. And if you don't even know who's doing the cut, like that just doesn't sound like what a top trainer would do.
Look, I can guarantee you Freddie Roach knows who his cut man is.
Or
I,
he at
I, I
least knows that there's gonna be one that's qualified,
right. Robert Garcia, all those guys, right? All these guys know who their cut man is, and I can guarantee you they have a say in whether or not that guy goes for does with them again. Maybe this was a one off, but I guarantee you, whoever that guy is, if Kenny Porter has anything to say about it, won't be in the corner again the next time Montgomery fights.
A couple of fight announcements this week that I think are worth getting excited about with such a dry boxing schedule. But it was announced this week after a purse bid that Dalton Smith would be challenging Subriel Matias for his junior welterweight strap at the Barclay Center in January. I'm going to actually go get that actual date while you give your thoughts on the fight. But this is a great matchup at 140, right? There's a bunch of really talented dudes at 140, one of the most stacked divisions in the sport. This is hopefully the first of many of just throwing a couple guys in the mix and seeing how they fare. But how do you see this matchup playing out?
I love this matchup because I think styles make fights, right? And I think that Dalton Smith is one of those guys where not everybody knows a lot about him, but once you start to pay attention to his fights, if you haven't paid attention to him, do yourself a favor, look his stuff up on YouTube. I'm telling you, you won't be disappointed. Subriel Matias I think this is going to give him an opportunity to again do what he does best, right? I think this is going to play a little bit more into his favor than it will Dalton Smith's, but he's got to be careful not to get complacent, right? Like Subriel, sometimes you can see him. He doesn't respect the guy that's on the other end because he thinks he can just walk through him. He's not going to be able to walk through Dalton Smith, bro. So I think as long as he's got that dog mentality in him, like, hey, this is a guy, right, that I've got to give, my 100%. I think he can have one hell of a night. Um, and that being said, I got much respect for Dalton Smith. I think he's got a shot, but I like Matias, man. I like Matias.
I was surprised after Dalton Smith stopped Jose Zapata, and I'm looking at that now. That was over a year and a half ago, which is hard to believe. I remember us doing a show after and feeling like, well, Smith it's only a matter of time before he's in an actually big fight now, because Zapata's fought so many of the guys at the top, won some, lost some, but is a good measuring stick for where Dalton Smith is at in his career. And it was a great performance. And since then, he's only fought twice, both of those being in 2025, both good wins, right? But one of them was a first round knockout. So essentially in the last year and a half, he's had one 12-round fight against Mathieu Germain, which was an eliminator of sorts. So I'll be interested to see. Smith hasn't been the most active. Matias hasn't been the most active either, but fought more recently in July in that fight with Puello. And even though he won that one, man, I do think that, we were talking about engine guys. He's been an engine guy his whole career, but those guys sometimes just take it on the chops. They take it on the guard. They're there to take your shots, even if they're blocking them, because they are always in position to punch. But he takes a lot of shots, man. And I felt like against Puello, it started to look like maybe there was an accumulation starting to happen, even though he won and even though he had his moments, and he's still dangerous, and he's still super Matias, and he could still knock you out. But I do feel like his engine was slowing down just a little bit. And I think that if Dalton Smith can box a certain type of disciplined fight like Liam Paro did, that he very much has a chance.
I don't know that I thought that he was slowing down as much as I thought that Puello just doesn't make anyone look good. You know what I mean?
Well, there's some truth to that too.
Puello, fighting him, I don't give a fuck who you are. It's not going to look pretty. Win, lose, or draw. You know what I'm saying? It's just not. So, and then Matias, again, bless his heart, he tried to make it look, a lot more interesting than it ended up being. Me personally, I feel like that was more on Puello than it was Matias. Again, hats off to Puello. I think he was doing what he needed to do to get through that fight and win it. If there's something Dalton Smith can take from that, if he can make that fight, like you said, do a little bit more of what Para did, maybe some of what Puello did to make it look ugly and get Matias off his game, then he's got a shot. And I think he does have a shot to do that. But I think Matias, if he can learn from that and get, Dalton Smith more into his type of fight, it's going to be lights out. I think the only way this goes Dalton Smith's way is if he does make it one of those uglier fights like Puello did, or like Paro, and then he's got a shot.
I think it's just with a guy like Matias, you can't let him set his feet. And I think that was part of what Paro did so well, was getting his work off, not loading up on anything, but getting it off quick and then getting on the move. And it takes a lot of discipline to do that for 12 rounds. And it takes, a great defense. It takes not getting caught. And I can guarantee you that Dalton Smith has never been hit the way Subriel Matias is about to hit him. I just know that for a fact. And at times, I think that's part of the problem with fighters that stay in the UK for all of the development, is there's like a certain kind of puncher that doesn't really exist out there, or it's not as, they have to go elsewhere to fight some real punchers, and they don't always react well to it. So I think that there's that potential, right? That you get like a Mauricio Lara versus Lee Wood type of situation where he just hits him hard and he can't take it on the night. But the way that Dalton Smith has boxed in the last couple of years, the skill set he's shown, if the durability can match at all, if he has any of it, I do think he has a very good chance of outboxing Matias if he can keep that discipline.
We're going to find out because Surreal Matias chops wood, bro. Like, he's going to start chopping that tree down early. Because he does have some highlight reel looking knockouts, right? I think people don't give him as much credit for his body. I mean, his body work is vicious. You know what I'm saying? And that sets up those knockouts because you can't take it the way you did. You can't take it the way in the fifth round is the way you were taking them in the first round. And again, like you said, if he can find his way to get around those heavy body shots early on, I think he's got a shot to outbox Matias. But the problem is once Matias has drawn you into his type of fight, it's over. You know what I mean? Whether it's over in the first round or the 10th round, it's over. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
he's also a big puncher, but I think he is more, as much as he's a puncher, he's an engine guy because he starts a little slow and then he picks it up gradually and he doesn't load up on every shot, right? He just tries to touch you and keep you in place. He's like a better BF puncher. Like he's obviously devastating. He could obviously get put down with one body shot, but there's a way that he wears on you over time that I think just most guys are not going to be able to handle.
And here's the other problem when fighting Subriel Matias is he's got one hell of a fucking chin. You know what I mean? So even if you're Dalton Smith and you get your shit off and you think you're doing something, I promise you it doesn't have the effect you think it does.
Do not get caught admiring your fucking work.
Right. I forget what fight it was, but there was a fight where it was a shootout and the guy was giving Matias everything he could handle. There were a couple of times where I think he wobbled Subriel, and then Subriel landed his, and it was a completely different reaction. You know what I'm saying? And it's because you realize, oh, he wasn't hitting me as hard as he really can those other rounds. Now he is, and this shit is different. It's like you said, he's going to be touching you, and he's even going to hit you with some decent shit. But when he really puts his shit on, you're going to be like, hold on, wait a minute. Where the fuck was that?
Well, and the other thing I think people forget was after Nomaschenko, there was no Mastias, bro. I mean, he was making everybody quit for a couple of years there. It wasn't even like he was putting them to sleep. He was just beating them down, and they go back to the corner, and they're like, fuck this.
And that's more impressive than those one-shot knockouts, right?
Yeah.
I think he had like 5 or 6 guys in a row, to what you were saying, who hit the no mas button on him.
Yeah.
To me, getting another guy at that level to quit, oh man, come on, bro.
There's something about when you watch Lomachenko and Nicholas Walters, like there's worse ass whoopings, right? But I can't remember a fight where another guy just tactically like broke another guy's brain. And that's kind of what happened in that fight. And Walters has never been the same, has come back to boxing a couple of times. It's been really weird, but was the guy going into that fight at featherweight. And just tactically was sick. But there's something to be said for a guy who doesn't do it to you physically, they do it to you mentally.
Right. I mean, let's be really clear. We've all seen it, and we've seen it several times, and it's a thing of beauty, right? Because those first early rounds, we all see the same thing. He's touching, but he's not really hurting anybody. But he's doing enough, right? And then it's around that 4th or 5th round, you start hearing the thud, you audibly, you know what I mean? And you hear the guys when they take those punches. And then right around the 5th or 6th round, they get back to their corner and they're looking at these guys like, what the fuck did you sign me up for? Like, who is this guy? Like, you know what I mean? And I've been hitting him with Sunday punches and he's in my chest. What do I do with that?
Yeah. The other big fight announcement for the week, added to the December 6th PBC card between Lamont Roach and Isaac Cruz, will be a middleweight unification between Janabek, Alim Hanala. I think that was how you say it, Alim Hanula, I think that's as good as I'm going to get. But we'll say Janibek is going to be taking on long-time middleweight contender and pound-for-pound contender Erislandy Lara. This is definitely the most significant middleweight fight since Adames and Shiraz, and is probably more significant than that. Maybe the most significant since the second Triple G and Canelo fight, right? I mean, I can't think of a another significant fight of the last 5 to 6 years. While I get some water nibs, give your initial take on this matchup, and especially with Lara being 42 years old, but really every time we see him out, he just looks like the same guy. He somehow keeps Father Time off of his fucking back. I don't know how.
I mean, look, Erislandy Lara is. I'm not going to say he's got the key to the fountain of youth, but if there is somebody who's giving Father Time a run for his money, this is the guy. He's definitely, like we said, he's the old man in the division. But every time, he gets in there with one of these young pups or a guy people think should be able to beat him, whether they're outboxing him or they feel that they've got more power or whatever the reason, right? Or just that he's getting older. A lot of guys make the mistake of thinking that Erislandy Lara is not aging well, and he is. If anything, he's getting better, with age. The thing with Janibek is for all those reasons, right? For all those accolades that I just gave to Lara, you then have to look at Janibek and say, okay, well, hold on, wait a minute, bro. This dude is dangerous on a whole bunch of different levels as well. So, with Janibek, you've got to be sitting there going, all right, well, Lara's dangerous. You know what I mean? And not only is he dangerous because he can box your ears off, but he's dangerous because, he can stop you as well. But for my money, bro, like I've picked against Lara the last 2 times, and it was a fool's errand. You know what I'm saying? And I love Janibek, and on paper I think he should beat Erislandy Lara, but I can't pick against him again because he made me look so stupid the last 2 times. I'm picking Lara, bro, I don't care what I look like come fight night. I think he wins.
It is tough to argue against him. It's tough to argue against him, not only because of the Danny Garcia fight, a year ago when he was already in his 40s, not only because he's fought every single style, but this is a guy that is arguably undefeated, right? There's a very easy argument to be made that he's never lost a fight, and he's been in with some of the best of his era. And time again, he's just shown that he's not somebody to forget about. I think,
not for nothing, he wins the hottest wife award. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, there you go. Hey,
hey,
but listen, he doesn't fight often, and at times his style, I think, has not been the most pleasing to American fans. But he's also had a couple of classics, like his fights with Angulo and Jarrett Hurd are truly classic fights. I think his fight with Hurd is one of my favorite fights of all time.
But as I was saying, but when you were getting the water, bro, he's gotten better in his old. I think, and for my money, you know what I'm saying, because he is willing to exchange more. He is banging more with these guys, right? Pause. So he's definitely, in my eyes, he's gotten better, at least more entertaining. I shouldn't say better.
It's like with Bernard, where I think, like, when you have a defensive style like that, and then you start getting older, the judges are not doing you any favors, right? So he's kind of sat back and fought a more laid back style with Jermaine Taylor, and they're close fights. Kind of could have gone either way, both of them. But they go to Jermaine because Jermaine's young. There's more promise. There's a bunch of reasons, why it goes to Jermaine. And I think with Lara, it was like after the Hurd fight, or no, maybe it was after the Canelo fight. He was like, I think I have to be more physical to get these decisions. Which maybe didn't serve him against Hurd, but I don't think he had much of a choice that night either. And I think that he's mixed. He's known when to be offensive better as he's gotten older. I think those instincts have gotten better. And I think he knows that the sport, the judges, the officials, the sanctioning bodies, nobody's going to do him a favor. So he's gotta be dominant.
Whenever he's fighting, sign me up. And I don't care who you fight. But
I gotta
I
give
will say
Janabek
this.
a chance though.
Janabek is amazing, and I'm a fan. But it again, because of everything we just talked about, it's hard to pick against Laura, even against a guy on paper who should beat him.
Janabek's had another guy with activity issues. So we got two very talented guys, two decorated amateurs that have just had great pro careers, and just we don't get to see them enough. I think that an active Arislandi Lara is always better for boxing and better for the middleweight division, but it just hasn't been so. And I think it's getting worse, particularly as the sport, is going through all these transitions.
Who you picking, bro? I'm
I'm
rolling.
I'm gonna pick Laura, and I think it's gonna be close. And I think that there's always the potential that Laura wins 7-5 and they give it to Janabek. That's not gonna blow my mind if that's how it plays out. Because Janabek is younger, and but in terms of skill set, like I love Janabek's explosiveness. He's a good puncher. He's got good hand speed, but I think that he's jumping into a deep end here that he hasn't really even had like a dress rehearsal for. And I think that he's gonna be seeing a lot of things he's never had to deal with before.
I think, to be honest with you, I think the inactivity does well for Lara. Plus the fact that he with few exceptions, he hasn't taken a lot of punishment in his boxing career to begin with. So when you throw all that in there, yeah, he's 42, but can you
He's very preserved.
Can you name 5 fights where Arislandi Lara had to go to war? You know what I mean?
I can name 2, and they're the 2. It's Angulo and Hurd. Other than that, it's all been on his terms.
And that's it. When you consider how many fights he's had, and you can name 2 fights where he's really been either been in trouble or had to go to war. Look, man, there's a reason
I'm a big Arislandi Lara stan. Like for a long time, I've been that way. Like I low key think he's the most underappreciated fighter of his time. I think he's arguably the greatest Cuban fighter of all time, and I think that there should be no doubt if and when he decides to wrap it up that he's a first ballot Hall of Famer and one of the best of his time. I don't know if he'll ever get that recognition. But I certainly think he's, as underappreciated of a fighter as we've had.
For boxing heads like you and me and everybody at the ITR family and the guys in our chat, the guys that watch us, typically the people that watch us are boxing heads, and they'll agree with you. The casual fans aren't going to know who really respect him just because of, again, everything we just said, right? Like he didn't do a lot of the shit he's doing now earlier in his career, but I think again, you have to appreciate the boxing, not the fighting, but the boxing that this man can put on. When it comes to boxing, he's one of the best. You know what I mean? He's just now starting to fight, which makes him a more appealing to the casual fans. But I'm here to tell you, man, when he hangs it up, just go ahead and send him a jacket.
And fucking longevity, man. I'm always giving guys props for longevity, man. And it was damn near 17 years ago that I was screaming at the TV at the worst robbery I've ever seen in boxing, which was his fight with Paul Williams, that he dominated, and it almost felt like it should have been stopped a couple of times. And here he is. He's still around. They ripped him off in 2008. And here he is even to this day. Our guy Adari Panat says Moses Atama versus Jai Opetaia would be a good future fight. That would be very interesting. I think Opetaia's got to fight Ramirez. We got to get an undisputed cruiserweight champion, especially when we have a matchup that's that interesting. I know that Zordo just had surgery for an injury of some kind, so they have to wait for that. But I think that down the road in a couple of years, I think that would be a lot of fun.
I will tell you this. Opetaia is going to be Usyk in 5 years, bro. He's going to be.
That's a big
He's
swing
going to
there.
be. he's going. I think after he sews everything up with Zerto at cruiser, he's going to move up, and I think he's going to get big fights quicker than even I think Usyk did, and I think he's going to win them. I think his skill level is. I mean, we haven't seen that in a long time, bro.
I agree with you offensively. I don't think he's got the defensive chops. That's where I get worried because and Zordo's at times has had that problems too, like getting clipped in fights that you're dominating. I just think that as explosive and as exciting as Opataya is, some of that at heavyweight he's not going to be able to get away with. But I'm excited to see it because I think he's tremendous.
I just think he hasn't had to. I think he hasn't because he's been able to steamroll everybody at cruiserweight. I don't know. I don't know that he doesn't have it. I'm not disagreeing with you. I
Who
don't
you
know
pick
that
between him and Zordo? Who you pick between him and Zordo?
Opataya, hands down.
Interesting.
Even,
Well, we'll have a
don't even
very
need to think
fun.
about it.
Yeah, we'll have a very fun episode when that one comes out. Last, I guess, topic for the episode this week is last week I put out my most recent episode of The Fight Life with Mio Yoshida, who grew up in the Kagoshima countryside in Japan, moved to Tokyo, and then ultimately to New York City, my hometown, to try to make her dreams come true. It was shot at Breadwinners Boxing in Manhattan. And was the first of many different experiences in this game for me, namely having to deal with a translator and doing the subtitles and getting that interview right and making sure that as much as possible I accurately reflected what Mio was saying. But that's up now on our YouTube channel. I think you guys should go check it out. Mio has been the number one ranked contender at bantamweight in the IBF now since January. And Chernika Johnson, the unified champion, has yet to fight her. I'm not necessarily of the mind that that's some great injustice. She has been taking challenging fights. She fought Sharetta Metcalf on the Taylor Serrano undercard. But it is a fight that should happen, and I'm hoping for Mio's sake that it happens sooner than later. But definitely, please go check that out if you haven't already.
Great work, man. As always, Dakota's putting in this work for ITR, trying to put us on the map and doing another great interview. Hats off. I think a lot of people, in this industry shy away from doing a lot of these foreign interviews because of, the language barrier, if I can speak well today. So, hats off to you for getting that done, bro, and getting it done, professionally. And hats off to Mio, bro. Like, I know a lot of people again will look at, the record and go, oh, she's got 5 losses. But again, when you're looking at the competition level in the female ranks, you can have a girl with 6, 7 losses and but half of those losses will be to somebody who's a world champ because they're all having to fight each other. So I would say, don't look necessarily at her record necessarily as to who it is she's fighting. She's definitely, one of the top female boxers.
Listen, if you want to know anything about Mio Yoshida, all you got to do is go watch her fight with Ebony Bridges, man. And we talk about that in the documentary, and you can hear it from her words. But she was a last minute replacement. People don't remember the context of that fight. It was supposed to be an all Australian matchup between Ebony Bridges and Avril Matthew. And Matthew had an injury, which I think ultimately retired her. And Mio stepped in, I believe, in the first week of December. So she had about 2-3 weeks to prepare for that fight. And 2-3 weeks before that, had lost a controversial decision in her first fight with Sharetta Metcalf. So didn't have momentum on her side, didn't have the promotion on her side. Ebony Bridges was a massive star and celebrity outside of the sport of boxing. So she really had nothing going in her favor and just went out there and absolutely dominated from bell to bell and made it impossible for them to take it from her. And I think it was a truly like an incredible performance.
Where would you rank her as far as the division that she's fighting in? If it was a bantamweight, I think is what she's fighting at, right? I think she's got a strap now, right? She won her last fight and got a belt, if I'm not mistaken. So, where would you rank her in that division?
Listen, man, there's no doubt. Sugar Neeks is top, right? She's the top dog right now. Other than losing a close fight to Ellie Scottney, which I think is going to age really well. She's the dominant force. She's the star at the division. And then with her beating Sharetta Metcalf and Sharetta coming back and getting a great win in her last fight against an unbeaten prospect whose name I'm forgetting at the moment. I got to tell you, man, like I think that Shanika is at least in terms of fighters that are strictly 118 pounds. I think she's going to run out of high quality opponents sooner than later. And I think that whether or not you think Mio can win, the two questions are, has she earned it? And does she have the tools to make it interesting? And undeniably, both of those are true.
Hey man, you know what? I look forward to watching the doc. I think everybody, if you love boxing, right, go check it out, bro. I think that the Fight Life with Dakota, Slip and Weave, all the work that he's doing, getting the behind the scenes stuff that a lot of guys who've been around for a long time get told no. This guy gets the yes. So go check him out, man. I'm telling you, it's we talk about supporting local boxing, right?
Great segue.
This is exactly what we're talking about. Dakota is local boxing, guys. Let's be really clear. Dakota isn't out there, making, you know, he doesn't live in some high rise. He doesn't, you know, just come around once a week. He lives this shit, literally, right? He is local boxing, and the guys that he's working with, the girls that he's working with, he goes and he meets them in person. He's doing work with them that you'll never even see, right? Just to give you 15 minutes worth of content, but it's a grind. He's working every day to put in this shit. You have to respect not only again, it's not just about the boxers. It's not just about the trainers. It's not just about the events. It's about the people around the sport that make this sport what it is, right? Again, we always talk about, you got to support these guys so when they become world champions. Well, guess what? The Burt Sugars of the world, the Dan Rayfields of the world, these guys, the Max Kellermans of the world, they all had to get support too, right? They had to start from somewhere, and they started local. They got it together. Somebody showed them some love, put them on a platform, and they became legends in the game. We're looking at one right now, folks.
Fuck, man. That means a lot, bro. That means a lot. I really appreciate it. Go check out Fight Life Mio Yoshida. That was a hell of an episode, Nibs. Always a pleasure. Thank you to everybody in the chat who hopped in this week, and we will catch you next week. Peace, guys.
See you.